next year. I'm already ready to go back. But that just kind of goes to show how incredible camp is. It's not just about the fun. There's incredible services that happen. And a kind of a little testimony about camp too. Whenever Beatrice was talking about the miracles, there was a kid who the preacher on stage said, I feel like somebody in here struggles with color blindness. They're not able to see colors at all. And a kid raised his hand and they prayed over him, and he was able to see colors. He was able to see red, green, blue, all the colors. And we thought that was awesome, right? One kid being healed, that's incredible. We went to our leader meeting the next day, and it was there, but we found out that 5 kids were healed from that. So it was just an awesome experience for the youth to be able to see, that miracles still happen, that God still can do those things. So let's get into it. Passion for the next generation. Well, I think the first thing we need to take a look at is, what is the definition of passion? It's a strong feeling of enthusiasm or excitement, either for something or about doing something. Now, I know for some of you, including myself, especially this day and age, teenagers in the next generation can be scary. I saw some yesterday at the mall where I was like, you got neon green hair. I was a little nervous, right? I know it can be scary. But what I can say is, we also didn't see this type of attack on Christianity and identities like we do now, where it's a very real thing. The enemy is working overtime on this generation. He's working hard on this generation. And now part of having passion for them, for the youth, for the kids, is by properly teaching them the word, passing on Jesus to them, and actually caring about their relationship with God. And so that's what I want to share with you today. How can you have passion in their relationship with God? I want to go over a few statistics with you. I've got some math on here, so bear with me. So they did a study recently of 100 of this generation, kids all the way from 5 all the way up to 18. They did a study and found that 9% of the group could be designated as Bible engaged, which means they're centered on reading the Bible. Only 9% of 100. Now they did a study again on the people who are Bible disengaged. That was 47% of the group. 5 times as more as the ones that were centered on reading the Bible. This statistic right here got me. They also found that this generation was more prone than older generations to identify themselves as atheist, agnostic, or religiously unaffiliated. Previous generations are at 30%. This generation is at 40%. So it's 10% higher than previous ones. And what I was looking at, I wanted to see a study on, as we're doing this series of passion, on passion for your church. What is the parents' role in their students' life? How does it impact them in their relationship with God? And Proverbs 22, verse 6, it says, train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it. So that Bible verse is showing us that we train them young. Start them off young. Start them off now. And when they're old, they're not going to run away from it. But not only does the Bible talk about it, the statistic backs up the verse. One study found that when both parents were faithful and active in the church, both parents have a passion for the church, they're involved, 93% of their children remained faithful. 93%. When just one parent was faithful, when just one brought them to church, when just one was involved at church, it drops down to 73%. Just like that. Just one parent bringing their kid to church, it drops down to 73%. Now, when neither parent was particularly active, so they went every now and again, Christmas, Easter, the usual, 53% of their children stayed faithful. Now, here's this one. In instances where neither parent were active at all, they never went to church, only 6% of the students had a personal relationship with God, and it lasted. So you may think in your teenager's life that you don't have an impact on what they're going through. You don't have an impact on their relationship with God. But what I can say is, from the statistic and from the Bible verse, we have a huge impact. And how do we show them our passion for them? How are you leading your students to their relationship with God? Pastor Tracy, we can only do so much. We can only preach. We can encourage. We can give them godly advice. But your role is important to them. So that brings me to my first point. How can you have passion for this generation? How can you show them your passion? Teach as you have been taught. Each and every one of you in this room have been taught lessons by other people, whether it be your pastor, a friend, a mentor, whatever it is, you have been taught. And so teach your students, teach your kids as you have been taught. It says in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 19, teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. That Bible verse is not telling you talk to Jesus, about Jesus to your kids whenever you want to, whenever you feel like it. No, it says whenever you wake, whenever you lie down, whenever you're sitting down, when you're walking. Every moment of your life you should spend preparing your kids, showing your kids your passion, not only for your relationship with Jesus, but for their relationship with him. Those statistics that we read, some of those kids haven't even opened the Bible. They don't know who Jesus is at all. They've heard his name, but they don't know who he is. And you mean to tell me that some of us in here can't have a passion for our own kids and their relationship with God? We have to be serious about it. We have to share him with urgency. And let's look at Proverbs 22, verse 6 again. Start off your children on the way that they should go. And even when they're old, they will not turn from it. Again, the urgency. Don't start them off later on. Start them off now. If you haven't been doing it, the time is now. Let's move. Let's move with urgency. Show our youth, show our kids the passion that we have for their relationship with him. There was a kid that was at camp, and he was so involved. He was having the blast. He was out there. He had his hair all dyed pink. He was out there running the games. He was running the games so hard. He literally, I saw him. He threw up, wiped it off, and said, "I'm good. Let's go." I was like, well, how about you don't come next to me? Because I don't want to be next to that. I don't know if you're sick or not. So then the next day, we go to the service, and they bring him up on stage. And they're like, hey, why don't you share your testimony? And he says, midnight, the night before I came, I was going to attempt suicide. He said, if it wasn't for the passion that I felt for my youth pastors when I got here, I didn't think anybody cared about me. I didn't think they would care if I went to camp. I didn't think they would care if I wasn't here anymore. But I felt like I was supposed to be at camp. So we got to camp. He said, and these are his exact words, I felt the passion from my youth pastors. I felt the passion from my youth leaders for me to stay here. And now I am going to. So we have to show our youth, these kids, the passion that we have behind them. I would have never assumed that he was going through that, ever, just by looking on the outside. But then again, I didn't know him. I can't share my passion with him for him. But we can. We can share our passion for the youth and the students that are here in this room. And my second point, give testimony personally. Connect with them on a level where they understand. They mainly understand when you get personal with them. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, it's a long passage, but it's very important. It says, in the future, when your son asks you, what is the meaning of the stipulations, decrees, and laws the Lord our God has commanded you? Tell him, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Before our eyes, the Lord sent signs and wonders, great and terrible, on Egypt and Pharaoh and his whole household. But he brought us out from there to bring us in and give us the land he promised on oath to our ancestors. The Lord commanded us to obey all these decrees and to fear the Lord our God, so that we might always prosper and be kept alive, as is the case today. And if we are careful to obey all this law before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us, this will be our righteousness. So this verse is telling us that we need to link the doctrines of our faith to God's savings actions in our life. We are to give personal testimony to the difference that God has made to us and how he's brought us from bondage into freedom. We are not only to speak of our beliefs and behavior, but also of our own experience of God. We must be open about our struggles to grow and transparent about how true repentance works in our lives. I have preached sermon after sermon to the youth, but it's not until I can share personally, it's not until I can relate to them on their level with what they're going through, that I can really reach through to them. I mean, whenever I preach a sermon, the reason why you see some preachers starting off a sermon with a story is it sets up that relation. You have to be able to relate with them. You have to be able to show them your passion for them by personally relating to them. Point 3 is, this is a big one, be consistent. Don't just do it once or twice. Don't just do it whenever you feel like it. Do it consistently. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 6, it says, these commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. We are supposed to love God wholeheartedly, having the commandments on our hearts. This means we are not hypocritical or inconsistent in our behavior. Now, young people, this generation, are sensitive to any inconsistency, any ungenuine acts, and to anything fake when it comes to your passion for them. This generation is really good at seeing right through the fake. I am not going to sit here and ask my students to do something that I'm not willing to do. I'm not going to sit here and ask them to get up early and read their Bible and spend time with God if I'm not going to do the same thing. I'm not going to sit there and ask them to raise their hands during worship and not care what anybody else thinks if I'm not willing to do the same thing. You have to be consistent with this generation. I can sermon prep all day long for, I feel like, a powerful sermon. But if I'm not consistent with checking in on them, asking them how they're doing, and what are they really dealing with, then I'm not going to get through to them. And a study shows that that's the first reason a younger generation can turn from the faith of an older one, is because they're not being genuine, authentic, and consistent. This generation has people walking out on them left and right. People accepting them for who they are. People not willing to get down in the dirt with them and say, this is not who you are, this is the devil's lie, and this is who God says that you are. We have to be willing to do that. Regardless if their feelings get hurt, regardless if the world is telling us something else. Are we called to not be apart from the world? So why are we scared to share what the Bible says about not being like the world? We need passionate spiritual mothers and fathers who will realize that our purpose is not only here to fulfill the plans and callings that God has placed on our lives, but to do whatever we can to pave the way for God to do whatever he needs to in this next generation. We all need to be passionate about this generation. Why am I telling you we need to be passionate? Why am I telling you that all of these things? What does this even do? Well, because this generation is a mustard seed generation. Jesus speaks about the mustard seed in Mark chapter 4, verse 31. He says, the kingdom is like a mustard seed, which is the smallest of all the seeds on the earth. Yet when planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all garden plants, with such big branches that the birds can perch in its shade. What is needed from the mustard seed to go from the small size, what is needed for your students' faith to go from barely anything, it takes that someone helps plant it. Someone speaking over them, someone showing them their passion, someone planting that mustard seed in them. Seeds don't plant themselves. They have to be planted. And that's the calling of you and I, to be passionate for this generation, to pray over them, to speak to them, to encourage them. And I've seen so many times where that's worked. I know whenever I was at the church that I was at before, there was a youth student who, man, it was so hard getting her to come to youth. I would see her every Sunday, and I'm telling you it was God, because I would turn the corner, and there she would go. And I would invite her to youth, and she'd say, okay, I'll come. Okay, I'll go. I wouldn't see her Wednesday, so I'd turn the corner next Sunday, and there she is. Target girl, I need you to come this Sunday. Just come this Wednesday night, have fun. Just get to know the other youth and have fun. Eventually, she came. And then when she came, she was like, well, you know what, you're weird. You're trying to get me to come on the youth all this time. I went one time, I didn't like it, all this stuff. So then she comes for a worship night. We have a worship night, and she came. I invited her, she came. And she really developed this relationship with God that night. She gave her life to Jesus that night. And we go to camp. I had forgot all about me inviting her and her saying no, and multiple times. I forgot all about it. We go to camp last year, and she asked me to baptize her. And she says, because of your consistency with asking me to go to youth, I went. And now I feel like God has used you, and my life is forever changed. I had no idea that I had planted a mustard seed in her. I had no idea that God was using me for that. but he did. And so that's what I want to do today. I want to plant some seeds in this generation. Your greatest contribution to the kingdom may not be something that you do. It may be someone that you help raise up, someone who you help plant that mustard seed. So as the band comes forward, I want to do a few things today. I want to plant some mustard seeds in some youth and some kids today. I need this church. I want this church. I'm praying for this church to have a passion for this generation, to actually care where they go, to not accept them for what the enemy's lies say, to preach the gospel over them, to show them love, to show them their passion. So what I'm going to do is if I can have all the youth and the kids come up to the front. If you're a youth student, you're a kid, I want you to come up to the front. Just stand right here. Yeah, y'all come just right up here. Y'all can face that way. Y'all come right here. And then what I'm going to ask is we want to have passion for this generation, right? And we want to see this generation become strong in their relationship with God. We want to see each and every one of these kids do something for the kingdom. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to come and gather around them this morning, and we're going to pray over them. So y'all come up here. You can lay your hand on their shoulder. You can lay your hand on your head if you feel comfortable. But come gather around these kids.